The rain fell hard over Chicago that Friday evening, the kind of storm that made the city lights blur into streaks of gold and white. Emma stood by the window of the Whitmore law firm, watching cars rush through puddles far below. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. The office was quiet now, too quiet, except for the sound of rain against glass and the faint hum of the air conditioner. She sighed and tried her car keys again, but nothing happened. Her car had completely died in the parking lot. And the storm made the idea of waiting for a cab miserable. She was thinking about calling a rideshare when she heard a calm, familiar voice behind her. Rough night. Emma turned and saw Liam Whitmore, her boss's son. He looked casual, yet composed, with wet hair from the rain and a polite smile that carried both youth and confidence. He was only 26, a new law graduate helping out at his father's firm for the summer. Emma, who was 31, had seen him around for weeks, polite, curious, and a little too kind for the cutthroat world of law. "My car won't start," she admitted, trying to smile through her frustration. "Where do you live?" He asked. "Lincoln Park," she replied. "That's on my way," Liam said quickly. "I can drop you off." You don't have to," she began, but he interrupted gently. "Please, it's raining like crazy out there. I wouldn't feel right leaving you stranded." There was sincerity in his tone, no hint of pity or awkwardness, just quiet kindness. Emma hesitated for a second, then nodded. "All right, thank you." They walked together through the nearly empty office, their footsteps echoing across the marble floor. Outside, the air was thick with the smell of rain and the sound of thunder rolling in the distance. Liam's car, a sleek black sedan, stood waiting, shining under the streetlight. He rushed to open the passenger door for her, an old-fashioned gesture that made Emma smile despite the storm. Once inside, the warmth of the car surrounded her. Soft instrumental music played quietly from the speakers. Liam started the engine and glanced her way. "Comfortable?" "Yes," she said softly, brushing rain from her hair. "Thank you for doing this." "No problem." "I'm just glad I was still around," he said, pulling out of the parking lot. For a while they drove in silence. The streets glistened under the rain, and reflections of headlights shimmered like rivers of light. Emma relaxed into the seat, exhausted from the long week. She had been working late on a contract case for Mr. Whitmore, Liam's father, who was known for his high standards and calm authority. Emma respected him deeply, though working under him was never easy. Liam, on the other hand, was different. He was friendly, curious, and had a quiet way of making people comfortable. He wasn't arrogant like many young lawyers she had met. He asked questions not to impress, but to understand. So he said finally, breaking the silence, "How long have you been with the firm?" "Almost 5 years," she answered. "Feels like 10 sometimes." He laughed lightly. "That long? You must really like it." Emma smiled faintly. "It's not always easy, but I do like it. It's stable." Liam nodded. "I get that. My dad always said stability is underrated." For a moment, the conversation drifted to simple things, the cases they were working on, how demanding Mr. Whitmore could be, and how coffee seemed to fuel the entire office. Emma found herself laughing more than she had all week. Liam had a natural way of turning serious talk into warmth as they crossed the bridge over the Chicago River. The city spread out before them, glowing towers reflected in dark water. Liam lowered the music slightly, glancing at her. "You know, I've noticed something about you." Emma turned her head slightly, curious. "What's that?" "You're calm," he said. "Even when the whole office is losing its mind, you're just steady." She laughed softly. "That's one way to put it. I think I just learned not to panic about things I can't control." Liam looked at her for a second longer before turning back to the road. "That's rare," he said quietly. Emma didn't know what to say, so she looked out the window. The sound of rain on the car roof filled the silence. She wasn't used to people noticing her like that. Not her patience, not her quietness. Most people at work only saw her as dependable, not as someone with a story or feelings of her own. They stopped at a red light. For a brief moment, the street lamps illuminated the inside of the car. Liam's gaze met hers again, steady, thoughtful. "You're not like anyone else in that office," he said softly. Emma blinked, surprised by his tone. "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly. "You actually care? You don't just do the work. You care about people. I can see it." Her chest tightened slightly. It wasn't a romantic statement, not really, but something about the way he said it made it hard to breathe for a second. She looked down, tracing a raindrop that slid down the window. "Thank you," she said, almost whispering. "That's kind of you to say." "It's true," he replied simply. The light turned green and the car rolled forward. The air between them felt different now. Not tense, but charged in a quiet, invisible way. Emma didn't know if it was the storm, the music, or the way Liam's voice softened when he spoke. But something inside her stirred. She tried to remind herself that he was just being polite, the son of her boss. A young man with a kind heart and an honest face. But there was something deeper in his eyes. Something that made her wonder what kind of loneliness lived behind them. "Do you ever feel," Liam said suddenly, his voice thoughtful, "like you're watching life from a distance? Like you're there, but not really in it?" Emma glanced at him. "Sometimes," she said. "I think everyone feels that way at some point." He nodded slowly, keeping his eyes on the road. "I do a lot, actually." They didn't say anything after that for a while. The car moved quietly through the rain, both lost in their own thoughts. For Emma, it was a strange kind of peace, being next to someone who asked questions that sounded like her own. When they reached her street, Liam slowed down and parked by the curb. The rain had softened into a mist, and the air was cool and clean. Emma unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to him. "Thank you for the ride. Really? You saved me tonight." He smiled. "Any time." As she reached for the door, he hesitated. "Emma." She looked back. His expression was gentle, almost hesitant. "You're easy to talk to." She felt her heart flutter unexpectedly. "You too," she said, smiling softly. She stepped out of the car, her shoes splashing in a small puddle. Liam waited until she reached the lobby door before driving away. She turned once and saw the glow of his taillights fading into the misty night. Standing there, Emma realized something. It had been a long time since a simple conversation had made her feel seen. She didn't know what the next day would bring. But that ride home had quietly changed something she couldn't yet name. And though she didn't understand it then, that rainy night was only the beginning of something far deeper than either of them expected. The rain had softened to a thin drizzle the next evening, leaving the streets of Chicago shining under the glow of the city lights. Emma couldn't stop thinking about that ride home. It wasn't just that Liam had been kind, it was the way he had seen her, as if she were more than the quiet assistant who stayed late every night. His words had stayed with her, echoing softly in her mind. She told herself it meant nothing, that he was just being polite, but deep down, she knew something had shifted. The next few days at the office felt different. Liam passed her desk every morning, always greeting her with a smile that lingered a second longer than it should. He'd ask if she'd eaten, if she needed help carrying files, or if she wanted coffee when he went out. It was all innocent, professional even. But something in his tone carried warmth, a quiet, unspoken familiarity. Emma tried to act normal. She told herself not to read too much into it. After all, he was her boss's son, a kind, brilliant young man from a world much brighter and easier than hers. But no matter how she tried, her heart reacted before her logic could intervene. Every glance, every smile stirred emotions she hadn't felt in years. That Friday, the firm wrapped up early after a long week. As employees filed out, Liam appeared at her desk again, holding his car keys. "Heading home?" he asked. Emma nodded. "Yes." Finally, a quiet evening. He smiled. "You could use one." He hesitated, then added, "I'm driving by Lincoln Park again. Want a ride?" She froze for a moment. Part of her wanted to say no to avoid another night of blurred lines and silent meanings. But the way he stood there, waiting patiently, with no expectation or pressure, made it hard to refuse. "All right," she said softly. "Thank you, Liam." Outside, the evening air smelled fresh, the city washed clean by rain. They got into his car and soon they were driving through the glistening streets. the sound of soft music filling the quiet. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was easy, almost comforting. Emma looked out the window at the lights reflecting on wet pavement, feeling the gentle hum of the car beneath her. "You know," Liam said after a moment, "the city looks different after rain. Softer somehow." She smiled faintly. "Maybe because it's quiet for once." He laughed quietly. "Maybe. I like it when things slow down." "Everything's so loud." All the May glanced at him, surprised. "You don't seem like someone who minds the noise." He nodded. "I guess you'd understand. You always seem like you've had to figure things out on your own." Her heart skipped. He was perceptive, maybe too perceptive. "I suppose I have," she admitted. "Life didn't exactly come with instructions." He smiled slightly. "Then you're doing a good job improvising." She laughed gently, shaking her head. "I'm just trying to keep going. That's all any of us can do." They fell into silence again, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of quiet that felt like trust. The rain had left tiny drops clinging to the windshield, glimmering like stars under the streetlights. Emma's reflections stared back at her from the glass, and she wondered when her life had last felt this simple, this human. "Can I ask you something personal?" Liam said suddenly, breaking her thoughts. "Sure," she said carefully. He kept his eyes on the road. "Are you happy here? At the firm, I mean." Emma hesitated. "I don't know if happy is the right word. I'm grateful. It gives me stability. But I wouldn't say I wake up excited for it." He nodded slowly. "I get that. I think most people settle for stable, and you?" She asked, "Are you happy?" He gave a small, thoughtful smile. "I'm surrounded by everything I'm supposed to want. Opportunity, family name, success waiting at my doorstep. But sometimes I feel like I'm living in a house built by someone else. I keep looking for a door that leads to my life." His words lingered in the air. Emma felt them deeply. She understood that longing too well, the quiet ache of wanting more, but not knowing what more really was. "You'll find it," she said softly. "People like you always do." He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "And people like you." She smiled sadly. "We just keep trying to believe it's not too late." For a moment, they looked at each other, the world outside blurring. There was something fragile in the air. Not quite love, not yet, but a connection neither of them could deny. The car stopped at a red light. The music hummed quietly between them, a slow piano tune that seemed to echo their thoughts. Liam's hand rested on the gearshift, his knuckles pale. "Emma," he said quietly, "you make things make sense. When I talk to you, it's like—" The noise stops. Her breath caught. She looked at him, startled by the rawness in his tone. "Liam, I don't mean to make you uncomfortable," he said quickly. "It's just true." She swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. No one had said something like that to her in years. Something honest, with no hidden motive. It wasn't flirtation. It was something deeper, something she wasn't sure she was ready to feel again. The light turned green. He drove on quietly, his expression calm but thoughtful. The silence that followed wasn't easy this time. It was heavy, charged with everything they didn't say. When they finally reached her building, Emma felt her heart twist. The drive had felt shorter than it should have, like time itself had rushed to an ending neither of them wanted. As she unbuckled her seatbelt, she turned to him with a polite smile. "Thank you again, Liam. You didn't have to do this twice in 1 week." "I wanted to," he said softly. She froze for a second, then forced herself to look away. "You're kind." "Have a good night, Emma," he said suddenly, just as she opened the door. She turned back, rain mist glimmering through the car's headlights. He looked at her, eyes steady but uncertain. "Why does it feel like I've known you forever?" Her breath hitched. "Liam, I'm serious," he continued, his voice almost a whisper. "It's strange. Like I've been waiting to meet you for a long time." She couldn't think. Her heart was racing, her thoughts scattered. She didn't know how to answer something like that, something that sounded like truth and danger at once. Finally, she said quietly, "Maybe some people just understand each other faster than others." He smiled faintly, though there was something sad in his eyes. Maybe. Emma stepped out into the cool night air. The drizzle touched her skin like silk. As she walked to her door, she didn't look back this time. But she didn't have to. She could feel his gaze, warm and unspoken, following her until she disappeared inside. Upstairs, as she stood by her window watching the city glow through the mist, she whispered to herself, "What are you doing, Emma?" But no answer came. Only the soft sound of rain returned, and the echo of Liam's voice still lingered in her heart, a quiet confession disguised as a question. She couldn't forget. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets shining under the lights. All day, Emma had been thinking about that quiet drive home with Liam. The memory played in her mind while she worked the way he had listened. The way his smile had made the office feel a little less cold. She kept telling herself it was nothing, just kindness. Still, something in her chest felt restless. When the week ended early, Liam found her packing her bag. "Heading home?" he asked, his tone easy. "Yes," she said, trying to beat the traffic. He jingled his keys. "I'm driving toward Lincoln Park again. Need a lift?" She should have refused. She knew it was safer that way. But the warmth in his eyes and the softness in his voice made her nod. "All right. Thank you." Outside, the city was wrapped in a golden haze. They got in the car, and soft music filled the silence as they pulled away. For a while, neither spoke. The streets glistened, and the rhythm of the tires on the wet road felt like a heartbeat. "You know," Liam said finally, "Chicago looks calm after rain. It's almost peaceful." Emma smiled. "Maybe it's just tired like the rest of us," he chuckled. "Maybe." "Then quieter," he added. "I like the quiet. Everything's too loud most days." She looked at him, surprised. "You don't seem like someone who minds noise." "I do," he said. "My dad's world is all about control and image. Sometimes it feels like I'm living someone else's life." Emma nodded slowly. "That's not an easy thing to admit." He glanced at her. "You understand, don't you?" She gave a small smile. "Maybe more than I should." He smiled back, and for a few moments they just listened to the rain starting again, light and rhythmic. Then he asked, "Are you happy here?" "At the firm." Emma hesitated. "It gives me security." "That's enough for now. Security isn't the same as happiness," he said softly. "No," she agreed. "But sometimes it's all we can afford." He looked thoughtful. "I guess I'm lucky then. I have everything I'm supposed to want, and still something's missing." She turned toward him. "You'll figure it out." He smiled faintly. "And you?" "I stopped trying to figure it out. I just live day by day." For a while, the car filled only with the sound of tires and quiet music. The city lights reflected off the windshield, painting them both in soft gold. When they reached a red light, Liam turned to her. "When I talk to you," he said, "it's different. The noise in my head stops." Kama blinked, caught off guard. "Liam, I don't mean to say the wrong thing," he said quickly. "It's just true." She didn't answer. She didn't know how. Nobody had spoken to her like that in years, with honesty that wasn't trying to get something in return. The light turned green, but they didn't rush. The city moved around them, quiet and slow. By the time they reached her building, her heart was heavy in her chest. He parked by the curb. "You didn't have to thank me," he said. "I wanted to." She gave him a small, careful smile. "That's what worries me." He frowned slightly. "Why?" "Because things that start kindly have a way of getting complicated." He looked at her for a long moment. The city lights reflected in his eyes. "Then maybe it's worth it." "Prethcott?" She opened the door, needing the cool air outside. The drizzle brushed her face as she stepped out. "Emma," he called softly. She turned back. "Why does it feel like I've known you forever?" he asked. His voice was low, sincere, like he was asking himself as much as her. She didn't move for a long second. "Maybe some people just understand each other faster than others," she said at last. He smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Maybe." She walked toward her building. She could feel his gaze following her, not with longing, but with something deeper in certainty, maybe hope. Inside, she paused by her window, looking down at the street as his car disappeared around the corner. The night felt strangely alive. She touched the glass and whispered, "What are you doing, Emma?" But there was no answer. Only the quiet city and the memory of Liam's voice stayed with her, soft as rain, impossible to forget. He looked at her then, really looked, his eyes steady, serious, nothing playful about them. "I've meant it for weeks," he said quietly. "I just didn't know how to say it." Emma froze. She wanted to look away, but his honesty held her still. The rain outside blurred the world beyond the car, making it feel like they were suspended in time. "Liam," she said carefully, "you don't understand what you're saying. I work for your father. You're his son. People talk. This isn't about people," he said firmly. "This is about you and me." She shook her head, trying to find steady ground. "You're younger than me. You have your whole life ahead of you. You don't want this confusion." He smiled sadly. "You think this is confusion? Emma, I've never been more sure of anything." His voice was gentle, but the certainty in it shook her. No one had looked at her that way in years, not since before her last relationship ended in quiet heartbreak. She'd built walls around herself, strong ones, but Liam's words slipped right through the cracks. She stared at her hands, unable to meet his eyes. "Liam, feelings can be tricky. They change with time." He leaned back slightly, his tone calm but raw. "Then let time prove me wrong. But right now, this is real." Days turned into weeks, and though Emma tried to carry on as if nothing had happened, her mind refused to cooperate. Every time she saw Liam at work, a quick glance across the office, quiet good morning, a passing smile, her heart reminded her of that night in the car. His confession echoed in her head, soft but impossible to forget. Liam, however, didn't push her. He kept his distance, acted professional, and respected her silence. But his eyes told a different story. Whenever they met, Emma saw something gentle and steady in them, something that made her chest tighten. It wasn't obsession or impatience. It was care, and that made it harder for her to ignore. One afternoon, the company held a client event at a nearby hotel. It was elegant but exhausting, the kind of social event Emma usually avoided. Still, as part of her job, she attended greeting clients, shaking hands, keeping everything in perfect order. Liam was there too, dressed sharply, helping his father entertain important guests. He looked confident and calm, every bit the boss's son. Yet whenever his eyes found Emma's, a hint of softness broke through the professional mask. Late in the evening, after most guests had left, Emma went to check the conference room one last time. The lights were dim, and the sound of quiet music still floated through the hallway. She didn't notice Liam standing near the window until he spoke. "Long night," he said softly. She turned, startled. "Oh, I thought everyone had gone." "I stayed to help close up," he replied, stepping closer. "Didn't feel right to leave you working alone?" Emma sighed, a small smile forming. "You really don't have to keep looking out for me, Liam." He looked at her seriously. "I don't know how to stop." She froze. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. She wanted to tell him to stop, to remind him of the boundaries, but her heart beat too fast for a reason to win. "Liam," she whispered, "we can't do this." "Your father trusts me." "If he ever thought," Liam interrupted softly, "I know. And I'd never want to put you in a bad position. But pretending nothing's there doesn't make it go away." Ugh. Emma looked down. "It has to. That's the only way this works." He nodded slowly, his expression calm but full of quiet pain. "Then I'll keep pretending. But just so you know, I meant every word I said that night." Her throat tightened. "You shouldn't have said it." "Maybe not," he replied, "but you deserved to hear it." Before she could answer, a voice echoed from the hallway. It was Mr. Carter, Liam's father. "Liam, Emma, are you still here?" Emma stepped back quickly, putting distance between them. Her pulse raced as Liam turned toward the door. His father entered a moment later, smiling, unaware of what he had interrupted. "Good," Mr. Carter said, glancing at the neatly packed folders. "Everything's in order. Emma, you've outdone yourself again. Thank you for staying late." Emma smiled politely, hiding her nerves. Just wanted to make sure everything was ready for tomorrow. Liam's father chuckled. That's why I trust you more than anyone here. Liam looked away, and Emma's heart sank. The man who trusted her the most was the one she was secretly hurting without meaning to. After they left the hotel, Emma barely spoke on the drive home. The guilt weighed on her like a stone. When she reached her apartment, she sat on the couch, lost in thought. This was getting too close, too dangerous. She needed distance, clarity, something. The next morning, she made a decision. She requested a short leave, a week off to rest and handle personal matters. Mr. Carter approved it immediately, telling her she'd earned the break. She didn't mention it to Liam, and by the time he found out, she was already gone. Her week away was quiet. She stayed with her sister out of town, helped in the garden, cooked simple meals, tried to stop thinking about the office. But no matter what she did, Liam's face wouldn't leave her mind. The memory of his voice, honest, steady, full of warmth, followed her like a shadow. By the time she returned, she expected things to have cooled down. Maybe the distance would help both of them move on. But fate, as always, had its own plans. On her first day back, she was called into Mr. Carter's office. He was in a cheerful mood discussing upcoming projects and new responsibilities. Then, casually, he said, "Emma, I was thinking since Liam's been handling more client work lately, I'd like you two to work closely together for the next few months. You've always been good at keeping him grounded." Emma froze. Her heart dropped. "Of course, sir," she managed to say, forcing a smile. As she left the office, she found Liam waiting in the hallway. He smiled softly. "Welcome back." "Thank you," she said, keeping her tone neutral. He glanced at her uncertainly. "You didn't say goodbye when you left." "I needed space," she replied quietly. "I know," he said, nodding. "I missed you anyway." She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked toward her desk, pretending to be busy. But inside, her emotions were a storm she couldn't calm. Days passed and working together became both easier and harder. They found a rhythm, professional, composed, careful, but under the surface. Emotions still simmered. Sometimes, when their hands brushed while passing files, both would freeze for half a second. Sometimes, when they laughed at something small, the moment lingered too long. Then one afternoon, everything changed again. Mr. Carter called Emma into his office unexpectedly. His expression was serious, his voice calm but heavy.